Hello, and welcome to the Diet NPO podcast. My name is Zach Caseberg, and I will be your host. I hope all is well with you, whether you're a curious listener, an RD2B, or a current RD, or just someone who wants to stumble upon this and learn a little bit more. I also think that learning is greatly important. Learning how to do something different, learning how to do something difficult, learning how to do something you suck at, all feel like worthy ventures in some way. The RD exam probably feels a lot like that sometimes. It feels hard like that, where there's days that you don't feel like studying, there's days you don't feel like learning or getting better on some of these concepts. But knowing that, despite the hardship, it'll be good for you and it'll be worth it. I still, to this day, have different moments and different tasks that I try to challenge myself with, but I also have times when I'm not pushing myself that the way I should, and so I have to be aware of that as well. Like this podcast, I can tell you I have no clue whatsoever about what I'm doing. And even sometimes I wish I had a producer to blame, but that's still on me. Maybe I'll give my dog the role of producer, and that way I'll have someone that I can tell about the quality of the videos or quality of the audio. So remember, folks, my dog Otis will be uploading my content for this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as you can check out my YouTube, Zach Caseberg RDN, watch the pods on YouTube, and check out some of the other content that we're putting up on that YouTube page. Check me out at Zach_snacks on Instagram as well. Don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, and we can know how we can create a better product for all of you in that case. No matter what you're going to do in life, finance is somehow going to work its way into it. It's going to worm its way in. Now, I'm not going to give you the lesson on finance that I should have gotten some 15 years ago. Damn you, debt. But I can give you a little bit of information related to needing to approach the RD exam. Sit back, relax as we dive in to the always captivating topic of finance in food service. When we're talking finance, there's a ton of terms that are going to appear and pop up when it comes to the RD exam. And these terms are going to be essential for when you're going to be approaching questions. So we're going to be talking today about ratios. Remember, a ratio is just showing the relationship between two numbers or two values. If my ratio of bananas to oranges is 2-1, that means I have twice as many bananas as opposed to what I have oranges. So use that example as we're going through these ratios. We're going to start out with the simplest form of this, our asset versus our liability ratio. What does this mean for a business? It's comparing the resources, our assets, compared to our debts or our liabilities that we owe to other people. Obviously, to be a good operational company, we want to make sure we have a very good asset to liability ratio. And I'll give you a little tip of how you can go about approaching these. Think of one of your most trusted friends, someone who you consider an asset. They're dependable, you can rely on them, they'll spot you money if you need to, so they're a good asset. Now let's think of that friend who's a bit of a wild card or a liability. They're not necessarily trustworthy, and actually they end up costing you money because you're always spending money to bail them out of jail no matter where they end up in the night. You can also look at the current ratio, which is a very similar way of putting our assets versus the liabilities, but the current ratio is only looking at where the company is currently. So our current assets versus current liabilities. Boom, you just learned your first ratio topic. Now, that wasn't so bad. Let's try diving into some others here as well. The next one is going to be debt to equity ratio, and you may be able to figure this out a little bit for yourself. It will be the debt of the company, what we owe to other people, compared to the cash value of the company, aka the equity. That equity is generally a real concern for shareholders or stakeholders, as they obviously want the cash value of a company to be as high as possible. So overall, I'd like this to be a low ratio where I have a low amount of debt and a high amount of equity. One example that I just came up with was thinking of the debt that I owe on my mortgage versus the cash value of my house. It's best to have a lot of equity, a lot of cash value for my house compared to owing a lot of debt on my company or my house. So debt to equity ratio will be that second term to get familiar with. Let's take a third one before you take a little break. Inventory turnover rate. You've heard this before in other chapters, especially when we're talking about calculations and formulas. So I had to mention it. You'll be familiar with this one as we commonly use it all over the exam. It's the cost of the goods, such as food costs on top, divided by your average inventory value. All this is going to tell us is how quickly are we using up the products that we have in our storage area. This could be in my coolers, my freezers, or my storage room. A good desirable inventory turnover rate is going to be about 2 to 4 times per month. So we get our food refilled for our coolers, our pantries, about every 1 to 2 weeks in a month is what we're thinking of. If this rate is super high, such as an inventory turnover rate that's like 10, that means that you're getting like 10 trucks a month, and that's a little high. We'd want something more around the 2 to 4 times a month. And this super high inventory turnover rate can tell you that, hey, maybe your food is getting stolen, that's why you're ordering so much, or maybe you're not ordering enough each time you get a truck. So those are your ways that are going to indicate of how well are you maintaining that inventory. A super low rate means that we're not moving this food out very often, and you're going to have issues there where you have tons of waste or not enough customers because you're not ordering food very often, maybe once a month. And then think of all those produce items, fresh meat and chicken that would obviously go bad over that time. So a low inventory turnover rate is also a bad note, but it's a good little financial value that you need to be familiar with to know how your business is operating. Phew, okay, so let's take a break. Anytime I'm doing management, finance, I like to give myself a break and maybe give you a break too. Let's do one practice question on these ratios that we've been talking about. Which of the following would display a business that has relatively low debts? Okay, which of the following would display a business that has relatively low debts? Let's see here. Asset to liability ratio of 1 to 4. For A, that would be like saying that I have 1 asset for every 4 liabilities. To me, that kind of sounds like I would have high debts, because if I have 1 to 4 for asset to liability, that's like saying I have a lot more liabilities and a lot more debts. I don't think it's A, because we're looking for the one that has low debts in this case, right? B, debt to equity ratio of 1 to 4. Okay, so it's saying I have a 1 for my debts, equity for a 4. More debts than I do equity. This seems pretty realistic, right? And I think this would fit well for our answer because we're looking for the answer that has relatively low debt. So I'm going to hold on to B, debt to equity of 1 to 4. C is debt to equity of 4 to 1. So it's saying I have 4 times as much debt as I do equity. This doesn't sound like it fits with our answer either because we're looking for the one that has low debts in that case. So I don't think it's going to be C. D, inventory turnover rate of 3. Well, that's right between that 2 to 4 value. I don't know if it's going to be telling me much about the debts that I owe to a company. So I don't think it's that one either. That's going to leave me with answer B of having a debt to equity ratio of 1 to 4, meaning I have debt of a 1 and 4 times of that is the amount of equity or cash value I have. All those other answers either weren't a good fit or they displayed examples of high debt in that case. So now you can look at your values, see where you're falling on your debt to equity a little bit here too. Nice work. Now that you've gotten a little bit of practice question in, you've gotten a little bit of a break, let's hit these other ratios and let's lock these things down. Only about 3 or 4 more to go through at this point. An easy one to start with is going to be your profitability ratio. And this one might be another one that you can figure out for yourself. A ratio that's showing your ability to generate a profit in relation to sales. You see, a company can have really high sales, meaning they're selling lots and lots of product. but you might really have a lot of high costs in that case. And really, if you have a lot of sales, but a lot of costs, you're not really that profitable. Well, this profitability ratio is looking at how well are you generating that profit in relation to sales. So as your sales are going up, are you continuing to generate profit on top of that? So this ratio is literally saying, how well do you generate profit as you sell more products? And another way of thinking of this is how much profit you're getting for selling a house. That's that key number we look at. If you sell your house for $2 million, but the house cost you $5 million, well, you didn't really end up having a profit on that house, did you? $2 million sounds like this great number to sell your house for. But then again, if you ended up paying $5 million in the first part, well, you sure didn't generate a profit on your house when you sold it, did you? So use that as a little helpful profitability ratio tip there. Now we got a twofer for you, and I'm actually excited to teach this because whenever I stumble upon something that I struggled with on the exam and I finally get it to click for myself, I love that because I picture someone like you is in that same position as I was when I was studying. So I really love to get these down together so that I know I don't struggle with them. The two ratios we're talking about is solvency versus liquidity ratios. Now they're saying something similar, but we're going to differentiate them. The solvency versus liquidity ratio, it's looking at our ability as a company to meet financial obligations. A solvency ratio shows your ability to meet the long-term obligations of your company. The liquidity ratio is your ability to meet the short-term obligations of your company. And we're going to talk more about those. Solvency ratio, I want you to think of puzzles take long terms to solve. Solvency to solve long-term problems. This is going to be like our ability to keep the business open for the next 5 to 10 years. We're looking at those long-term obligations, those long-term debts that we owe to other companies and say, hey, with how we're tracking now, are we going to be able to keep the doors open in 5 to 10 years? Are we going to be able to create that new center that we wanted to all those times? Liquidity is different because we can look for another clue here. Liquid rolls off surfaces very quickly, such as the side of a car when it's raining. So liquidity ratio is going to be your short-term or fast obligations. These are things such as paying for the food for your restaurant, keeping your lights on, keeping the bills paid. These are all short-term obligations that you're focusing on here. And it's really important for a company because you have to be able to meet your needs in the short term if you want to go long term there. One more here, we have our activity ratio. Kind of more of these general ones that I want you to be familiar with. It's a general term to say how effectively is an organization using its assets. How effectively are we using our dining space, our storage areas? Are we filling the seats for the occupancy? What's our inventory turnover rate compared to our percent occupancy in the restaurant? How well are we filling those seats? These are all types of things that we're looking at for an activity ratio to consider how well are we using our assets, of our space, of our food, of our products. In my example for remembering this was how effective are your legs at producing speed. Legs are an asset for walking you around and running you around everywhere. How effectively do they do that job of running them around? That's that activity ratio there. Now that your knowledge ratio is so high, let's learn how to use this for a couple more practice questions here. The ability for a business to meet short-term obligations is known as what? A, profitability ratio, B, solvency ratio, C, liquidity ratio, or D, activity ratio. The ability for a business to meet short-term obligations is known as the what? Profitability, solvency, liquidity, or activity. Now I'm going to use process of elimination because I'm going to go ahead and remove the ones that I don't like out of this. Starting with A, profitability ratio. I remember it as that is our ability to generate profit in relation to sales. So for my question, the ability for a business to meet short-term obligations doesn't seem like it's talking about profit. So I'm going to rule out A. I don't think profitability ratio is a good fit here. B, solvency ratio. Well, I thought a little bit about puzzles and how puzzles take a long term to solve. Solvency ratio. So solvency is looking at my long-term obligations is what I remembered there. And this is asking about my short-term obligations. So actually, I don't think B, solvency, will be a good fit either, because that's going to be my long-term obligations I remembered there. C, liquidity ratio. Liquid rolls off surfaces very quickly, so short-term obligations. I think that's going to be a great answer for us, and I'm going to put a little check mark by that. And D, activity ratio. How effectively are we using the assets of our company? I don't think that's going to be related to obligations, so I'm going to rule out D. And so my best answer for the ability of a business to meet short-term obligations is going to be known as the liquidity ratio, short-term obligations there. Second question here. A business manager is exploring the ability of the business to generate profit in relation to sales or asset investments. This would be best found in the what? Profitability ratio, solvency ratio, liquidity ratio, or activity ratio. Business manager is exploring the ability of the business to generate profit in relation to sales. This would be best found in the what? All right, A, B, C, and D. So I'm going to get process of elimination here to see why do I like this answer, why do I not? Starting with A, profitability ratio. Profitability ratio was about the ability to generate profit in relation to sales. I think this fits well for my question, so I'm going to hold on to A, but I still need to read through my other three just to check those out. Solvency ratio. We just talked about this. Solvency was meeting those long-term obligations, and I don't think this fits well because we're looking at how we're going to generate profit in relation to sales. So I don't think it's answer B, and I'm going to rule out solvency ratio. C was liquidity ratio, which was meeting those short-term obligations of the company, like keeping the doors open, the lights on, the food purchased. And I don't think that's about generating profit. It's more just saying, how well are we going to be meeting these obligations? So I don't think it's liquidity ratio. I'm going to rule C out in that case. And the last one, activity ratio. How well are we using our assets? So when I look here, our ability to the business generate profit in relation to sales or asset investments. Okay, so I'm kind of stuck between activity ratio and profitability ratio. It's about a 50-50 shot here, and it's exactly 50-50, a 1 in 2 chance. If I had to guess on the exam, I could guess between these two, and I have great odds of getting it right still. However, I really liked profitability ratio as my best answer here, and I'm going to go with that as my best fit. Profitability ratio will help if this manager is exploring the ability of the business to generate profit in relation to sales. Profitability ratio there. Now that you have those questions down and now that you're now so knowledgeable, let's get into the good, the bad, the ugly of food talk. And today it's pretty good. We recently tested at our dining center doing halal beef patties at my work. Now, that might not sound so special, but it really blew my mind there. This was a fresh meat product that met standards for Zabiha Halal in our dining center. That's going to be related to how the product is slaughtered, packaged, the prayer that is said during the slaughter, how it's bled, how it's transported, and getting a Zabiha Halal product is really exciting for us. Our excellent chef decided to add something to really flare up these burgers and make them the best he could. He didn't want to just try it plain. He said, how can I make these taste even better, to see how that was going? His philosophy was, he said, if you're ever getting just a fresh or a frozen beef product like a burger, you need to find ways to season it up yourself. Don't just rely on that beef kind of taste to bring out that flavor. Go ahead and add some salt, some pepper, some garlic to really flare out those flavors, and he did great. He did one burger that had a crispy pancetta with mushrooms. It was a smoked cheddar and onions. The third one was dusted in dehydrated chili peppers for more of a chipotle flavor. And all of them were so great. I didn't even feel like I was just eating a burger at that place. Now, pancetta being a pork-based product, it's not going to make it quite halal for us, but it was so cool to see what chefs can do and add that extra flavor. So always recommend seasoning your own burgers before cooking. Leaving them plain, I think, is going to leave that kind of beef taste, which isn't always as scrumptious when you find some great dry seasonings to really hit that surface of the burger with. So if you consume beef, don't forget that heme iron that you're getting for all those healthy blood cells as you're learning about the RD exam and getting stronger on your labs too. Now, go rest now that you've learned all your ratios and your finance. You let your brain, your best organ of your body, take a rest now. Please don't forget to rate, review, subscribe to the Diet NPO podcast. Check me out on Instagram and Threads for Zach_snacks. Check out my YouTube page for additional content and additional free lessons. And as always, happy studying, RDs to be.